going to match the color of this dark chocolate. I'll start with pyrrole red and a little bit of ultramarine blue. The blue makes it go brownish, depending how much you add into it. It still looks too reddish. I think it might need some yellow too. So this is Ben's yellow, which is a transparent yellow. And I think more of the blue. It has to go lighter. The white definitely made it go cooler, so I think I'll have to add more yellow in there. There's definitely more yellow. There's still way too much red. More yellow and more blue. I can see that there is just way too much red in there. So that's getting closer. It's not as red as it was before. You can see that this is much more red, and the way that I dulled it down was I added more yellow and blue. If you think about it, yellow and blue makes green, so that makes sense. So from here, it's just fine-tuning it, and it might help to spread it on some paper. I'm trying to find a spot on the chocolate that doesn't have lines or anything. That looks pretty good. I'll match the color of this lighter chocolate. This is like a milk chocolate. And this time I'll use cadmium orange and ultramarine blue. You can think of brown as being either a dark orange or a dark red. And which color I start with depends on the shade of the brown. You can see this looks much more orangey than this one, which, as I said, it had quite a bit of red in there. Most color wheels don't show shades, which is the color mixed with black, and that's why you don't see brown on the color wheel. I'll start with the cadmium orange, and I'll add a little bit of ultramarine blue and see how brown that goes. I'll add a little bit more. I think I might need to add a little bit of red, but we're not too far off. So I'll just add a touch of this pyrrole red. You can also use cadmium red. I just prefer pyrrole red. Now my color looks too saturated. I think it needs more ultramarine blue to make that duller. The thing that really jumps out at me now is that my color is much too dark. If I add a little bit of titanium white to it, that will lighten it up and give me a better idea of what it looks like. It's getting much closer. There's some variation in the color of this chocolate, but we're getting pretty close. Maybe just a little bit more white. I think it'll help if I brush some of this on some paper so that it's smoother. You can see that my color is much darker than this square right here, but this one is closer. So I'll work with that one just so there's fewer steps. It needs to go slightly lighter. That's pretty close. It could go just slightly more magenta. Add a very small amount to it. I think this color is pretty close, but if you really want it accurate, there's these subtle tweaks you can make, which in most cases when you're painting, it doesn't really matter if the color's off by a little bit. It's not too bad. Maybe just a touch of yellow. I think that looks pretty good. It looks like somebody ate half of this already. I wouldn't know anything about that. The peanut butter is even more orangey and yellow than the milk chocolate. Here's a comparison. These are all considered to be brown. So if you were to start with like burnt sienna or burnt umber, you'd still have to adjust it because you can't just use one brown for everything that kind of looks brown, if that makes any sense. This was Ben's yellow, which is transparent, but this is also cadmium yellow, and it's more opaque, but it's also kind of on the greenish side. If you compare it to the Ben's yellow has a little bit of an orange tint to it. I don't always use two different yellows. I can get away with just using 3 colors most of the time, but I like having cadmium yellow on there just because it's more opaque. So I'll start with the cadmium yellow. I'm trying to show there's different ways to mix the same color. Instead of using the orange, I'll just mix it from the cadmium yellow and a little bit of pyrrole red. This time, instead of using the ultramarine blue, I'll use a little bit of the phthalo blue, and it has quite a bit of tinting strength, so you only need a small amount. So it looks like I'm way off base, but I'll add more red in there. And that red counteracts the green. That's not too bad. Those flecks are really throwing it off. I think it might need a little bit of blue because it seems too saturated. Like my palette knife looks more orangey. And this is where you have to be careful. And that's why I like having a little bit mixed off to the side so I can dilute it and then add some in there. Take a little time to mix this in. Definitely looks too green to me in person. You can also tweak it with some magenta. Magenta is good at eliminating green casts. I remember I first did a peanut butter cracker color matching video years ago, and it was close, and then I added a little bit of magenta, and that totally got rid of the green cast to it. That's better. I think it needs more. See what I did there? I mixed some of the magenta into the color I already have, put it off to the side, and then I can take a little bit of that and add it to my mixture. It's just a way of creeping up on the color. If you add too much magenta, then you gotta correct for that. Still too green. Okay, now that's way too magenta, but it needs some white. These final tweaks are what take the longest. And that's because you're adding minute amounts to make these adjustments. And a lot of times you overshoot it, like I did already in this example, but you can fix it. So we're getting closer. Okay, so a little bit lighter. It's not too bad. I think a touch of yellow. It's getting closer. It has to go slightly lighter. I'll brush it onto paper so I can get a smoother sample of it. Seems a little easier to judge it this way. I'll add a little more red and a little bit more of the blue. I can see it needs some more yellow. Might be better to add it to the sample down here. It looks pretty good. The peanut butter has flecks of brown in it, but there's not much I can do about that. Here's another formula for mixing brown. I'll demonstrate it with these chestnuts, and you can use red and black to make brown. This is cadmium red light and carbon black. So I'll just mix that together. And that's a pretty good shortcut. I mean, that's like almost like the chocolate brown. It has to go darker. I might have to add some yellow or something to it, but this is a pretty close match already. I'll brush some of that onto paper just to get a better look at it. I'll have to pick a spot. I think this chestnut has a pretty good flat area of color. I think my color is too dark. Maybe I'll add a little bit of yellow to it. This is cadmium yellow primrose. That looks a little better. That looks pretty good. There's some variation in that chestnut, but I think that's a pretty close match. Maybe just a touch more red. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to match the color of this hamburger bun. People often tell me to start with brown, So this is burnt sienna. The thing is, you still have to make adjustments. So what would you add to this to make it closer to the color of the bun? If you haven't mixed browns from like primary colors before, you might not know what to add to this. And I could see that this is too red, and so I should add some yellow to it. This is cadmium yellow. It's a little closer. I need to squeeze out a little bit more. It's getting closer. It's still too reddish. It's not too bad. Maybe a little more yellow. There's some variation in the color of this bun, but I do think it needs some blue. You can see that that's like a little darker right there. So let's see what that does. Ultramarine blue. I'll add some ultramarine blue off to the side, and that way I can mix in a smaller amount. So that's probably too much. I could counteract that by adding in the rest of the color. It's pretty close. I think I can get a better idea by brushing this out on some paper. This color is a little bit streaky. I'm trying to pile it up a little thicker. It's not too bad. It has to go slightly lighter and more blue. So I'll dip into this color over here. I don't want to add too much. More white. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to match the color of this cookie. I'll start another one with brown. This is burnt umber, so I'll use it to match the color of this cookie. I need to make a little room here. So the first thing is compare it to the color, and it's obviously way too dark, but I wouldn't add white to it. The other thing I can see with this cookie is that it's more red. So red will help make it a little bit lighter, and obviously it'll make it more red. It's still too dark. I can see that the cookie's more yellow, and I'll add some of this cadmium yellow to it. You can also like test out a small amount to see if that's the right move. And I think that helped. I'll add a little bit more. The cookie has more blue in it, which doesn't make any sense, but it will make it darker and less saturated. It's pretty close. I think more yellow. That's the point here, is that you can rely on brown as the starting color. But you do learn a lot from starting with like primary colors, because you have to figure out what's the difference. I'd say that looks pretty good. There's a lot of texture in that cookie. See if I can smooth it out here. The edge of the cookie has the most uniform color, so that's what I'm trying to match. If anything, I would add just a touch of yellow to it. How about just a touch more blue? That looks pretty good. If you don't have all these colors, or you just want more formulas for mixing brown, you'll want to watch my ultimate guide to mixing brown next. Thanks for watching.